Good morning, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Dalila. I am a writer and a cultural coordinator, but I started my career in social work, so I'm very excited to be your host these next 2 days. The Belgian presidency of the Council of the European Union and the Department of Care of the Government of Flanders and the Flemish platform Strong Social Work have the pleasure of welcoming you all at the Bruges Meetings and Congress Center for the European Social Work Conference, Social Work Matters. It does. Across Europe, social workers are confronted by societal challenges like climate change, migration, and digitalization. Social work is essential in making sure no one is left behind in these challenges. This European Social Work Conference wants to shed light on these challenges and the ways in which social work makes a difference. Since this is an international conference and you don't want to miss anything that will be said, we have provided simultaneous translation from English to Dutch and vice versa, because later part of the panel discussion will be in Dutch. So if you don't have a headset yet for translation, you can find one at the entrance, but I think you all have one, right? Okay. This conference is a unique opportunity to exchange knowledge and experience, because there's so much to learn from each other, and so much we can do even better if we work together. So to encourage you to meet new people, we have a little game. You've been given a networking bingo card with your badge. Has everyone got one? Yeah? Okay. If you complete each challenge on the bingo card, you get a chance to win a box of delicious Belgian chocolates. Hey! So to win these chocolates, you must submit your full card with your name on it, of course, to the catering before the closing show tomorrow. So if you're a fan of Belgian chocolate, you know what to do. The 2-day program of this conference is very varied and very well filled. Central to the conference are inspiring social work practices and interesting research from all over Europe. Each day is filled with keynotes, panel discussions, interesting social work practices, and even social work related walks throughout Bruges. So, let's not waste any more time and get started right away. I therefore give the floor to Flemish Minister of Welfare, Public Health and Family. Please welcome her with a round of applause, Hilde Kivits.
Hello, good morning. Thank you, Dalila, dear academics, researchers, and social work experts, policymakers, civil society organizations, international guest social workers, and also the big boss of my administration, Karine. Welcome, and Bert, welcome in Bruges. Not Brussels, but Bruges. It's a joke, but you already knew it. As a Flemish Minister of Welfare, Public Health and Family, I in turn would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you at this beautiful conference center. As Dalila said, the BMCC is the perfect venue for conferences like this. It's a spacious and open building equipped with all possible modern facilities in a sustainable and attractive design, and all within walking distance of the historical center of Bruges, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And we have also very good chocolates, as you know. So, I hope you have already been able to take the time to enjoy the historical, cultural, and of course the gastronomic splendor of our capital of West Flanders. I am particularly pleased to note that this conference is completely booked with 465 attendees. This is how we are currently bringing together experts from all over Europe to inspire each other and to exchange views on 3 topical societal challenges that impact the social work sector at multiple levels: climate change, migration, and digitalization. My former colleague, Jo van Deurzen, started the Flemish platform Strong Social Work in 2018, following the first Flemish Social Work Conference. With Strong Social Work, we have created a robust movement in just a few years' time. One that strengthens and connects social workers from the broad sector, inspires them, allows them to learn from each other, and at the same time highlights the importance of social work. After 2 successful Flemish conferences, we are ready to venture into our first European conference as well. And judging from the program and the list of participants, this conference will certainly live up to high expectations. With this conference, Flanders wants to boost our ambition to invest in good social policies and a society founded on equality, social justice, and human rights. We want to encourage each other to keep investing in good social policies, human rights, and the support and emancipation of people in vulnerable positions, even in these uncertain times. Together, we must aim to create a Europe that leaves no one behind. In addition to human rights and social justice, the conference will focus on 3 central themes, as I said so: climate change, digitalization, and migration. 3 topical themes that are very, very relevant to social work in every country in Europe. As you all well know, we are facing a profound transition as far as climate change is concerned. To slow down global warming and keep the Earth livable, we need to change our lifestyles and commit to a greener, a smarter, and a more economical energy production and management. In such a context, it is very important to always incorporate sufficient social reflexes so that the new ecological policy avoids exclusions or, worse, create new ones. The same mechanisms apply to digitalization. New technologies offer numerous new opportunities, including for social workers, but the risk of digital exclusion is never far away. As policymakers, we must ensure that we constantly check whether we have everyone on board. Migration and the increasing ethnocultural diversity of European societies are also big evolutions with a major impact on multiple levels of social work. Policymakers and social workers are expected to tackle these challenges. The main question here is how we can implement or adapt our social services and social security to these challenges in order to help our social workers. But also how to maintain a wide base of support for the many solidarity mechanisms that have been a fundamental part of our social policies for decades. Esteemed guests, everyone here is committed every day to a social Europe. But if we want to properly identify and address not only the challenges, but also the opportunities and possibilities, we will have to continue to work together and build bridges. This conference is the perfect place to do that. Therefore, as the Flemish Deputy Minister President, I'm very pleased to welcome you all here today. I would also sincerely thank the organizers of this conference and everyone who contributed to this rich program, especially the speakers. But I'm directing my closing words to all of you and to all the social workers everywhere in Europe, because they make difference to so many people every day. By being active on the ground and offering support and assistance where necessary, by working with vulnerable people every day and by listening to the small and big concerns, but also by fighting for fundamental rights, by standing on the barricades, by identifying injustices and seeking solutions. And for that, as policymakers, we can only be extremely grateful. I wish you 2 inspiring days and hope you go home full of renewed energy fresh ideas, new contacts, and a little bit of good Bruges chocolate. Thank you very much.
Merci. Thank you so much, Minister Krevits. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a conference within the context of the Belgian presidency of the Council 2024. And so at the start of this day, the voice of the EU should not be missing. And for that, I would like to give the floor to Director for Social Rights and Inclusion of the Directorate General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion at the European Commission, Katarina Ivankovic-Knezevic.
Dalila, almost perfect pronunciation. Really well done. Really well done. First of all, let me welcome you this morning, dear Minister, dear Secretary General, dear Koen, he's somewhere over here. It is really an honor and a pleasure to speak at the opening of this conference, and also to pass a bit of messages what the EU level does for the social services and what the EU level does for the social work. Today and tomorrow, I'm extremely pleased to be surrounded by those of you who are working on the ground, who are delivering social services, and it's very important that your work is acknowledged, that your work is visible, and also for me as a policymaker at the EU level, it's very important to listen to what you have to say, especially now that we are at the cyclus of closing one commission and almost awaiting and welcoming a new commission. Therefore, it's very important to see and to hear what still needs to be done, what has been done, what worked well, but also what still needs to be done. It's not just a floskula, it's really the truth when we say that the social services are at the heart and the soul of the social Europe. And also, let me use this opportunity to warmly and really thank you for everything that you are doing on a daily basis, be it from the childcare to the long-term care to the palliative care, all the scope of the services. This is what you do, and this is what you do on a daily basis. When we say that social services play a fundamental role in Europe, we say that although it concerns almost everyone on all citizens on a daily basis, but it has an additional value for those who are vulnerable and who are most vulnerable, and your role is to help them, to lift them out of the poverty. The right to access the quality social services is very much embedded in our policies. I believe by now everybody knows about European Pillar of Social Rights, right? Yeah. Good. So in the pillar of the social rights, which is in a way we say it's our compass, it's our guide, it's our whatever. In the end, it's the 20 values which needs to be turned into a reality and into practice. So in the pillar of social rights, we see 5 elements important for the social services. The AAA, which I'm sure you know very well, the availability of the social services is a key element, but also accompanied by affordability and accessibility. These 3 elements cannot qualify without quality that needs to be guaranteed to our citizens, for, of course, the best social impact possible, and also the last but not least, the adequate working conditions. And I will be coming back on the adequate working conditions a bit later. As previously said, the conference is covering 3 challenges: climate change, digitalization, and migration. Indeed, we see on a daily basis that the consequences of the climate change have a deep impact on our economies, on the jobs, on the health of the citizens. And it's also clear that the vulnerable groups are more and are adversely affected by the direct and indirect effects of the climate change. Therefore, we must support those who do not have sufficient resources. We have to invest in tackling these climate challenges, and we need to do it now. We need to do it, indeed, immediately. The Commission, as you know very well, attaches great importance to designing and implementing so-called just transition policies. In 2023, one of the most significant documents was adopted, which is called Recommendation on Energy Poverty. So this recommendation aims at tackling the energy poverty and ensuring that vulnerable consumers have access to essential energy services and products. We have seen recently the impact of the energy crisis caused by the unfortunate situation in Ukraine, and how the member states have directly helped and supported the most vulnerable, either via providing vouchers for electricity or some other means. But this was just an ad hoc basis. We need to look deeper. We need to see where and how the climate change is going to impact. And another important thing, this help and this support needs to be very targeted. It's absolutely visible that climate change affects all, but targeting to those who are mostly in need is the task of all of the governments at all the levels. Also, there is another very important document, which is called the Recommendation on Ensuring a Fair Transition towards Climate Neutrality, that serves more as a guidance to member states on how to provide a targeted support to people, to households, to different sectors and different regions to achieve the fair and inclusive transition. And then, in order to put all of these elements in motion, and we know very much that all the good policies would be nothing without sufficient funding, the Commission has put in place the Social Climate Fund. This fund, once fully implemented, will have an overall budget of 86.7 billion euro and will support the member states to address the social impacts that for example, inclusion of buildings and transport and emissions trading systems will have on the vulnerable groups. So it's very, very important, especially those of you who know how to access EU funding, to follow and to watch for the Social Climate Fund possibilities. On the digitalization, it's not a mystery that in today's rapidly evolving technological landscape, ensuring the digital inclusion has become an urgent issue, if you don't want to say a problem or the priority, and it's visible on all the levels. However, in the same manner as the challenge with the climate change, the certain groups are at the risk of really facing the social exclusion, be it because they do not have sufficient skills, or they do not have sufficient means to purchase equipment, or those who are living in the areas where the connectivity is very low. So no matter what the challenge is, they need to be addressed. The digital inclusion is also one of the priorities for the European Commission, and our European Declaration on Digital Rights and Principles places and has individual at the center of all the actions and all the activities, stating and starting with the point that everyone should have access and technology, which must be inclusive and promote the rights of all citizens. Here I have to mention one particular group, which we follow very closely, which is even in danger of becoming more digitally excluded, and these are persons with disabilities. They do require additional assistance. They do require all the accessibility requirements to be put in place, and what we see as a reality is that we are still far away. Besides nice legislation like European Accessibility Act or Web Accessibility or some other initiatives, but there is still a long way to go, and there is still a long way to help not only persons with disability, but all of those who are in vulnerable situation to reach the level of really being able to utilize the best of the digitalization. And finally, the third topic, which we will be discussing in these 2 days, is the migrations. And migrations we see as an urgent societal issue. You, as social workers, are confronted, as I said, on a daily basis, be it with the refugees from the war zones, the climate refugees, the migrant workers, or any other person who comes either from the third countries or from the internal migrations within the Europe. Social services support these groups, which are often very culturally diverse. It's not about just an initial response. It's not about first help, but it's also making sure that their needs are fully addressed and that social inclusion in the community, social inclusion in our villages, cities, is guaranteed and is in place. At the same time, we as a Europe are facing really huge labor shortages in a wide range of sectors, including one of you, which you know the best, the care sector. The labor migrations from the third countries can help EU meet the demands and respond to the demographic trends. Last year in November, we have put in place and the Commission presented a proposal, so-called EU Talent Pool, where we speak about fair recruitment policies as a core of our proposal. And we try to identify how to address the shortages, but also how to address the fact that, for example, in the care sector, which is very heavy when it comes on a workload, and most of the time not sufficiently paid. So these elements needs to be balanced, and these elements needs to be addressed in parallel. All of these challenges are putting more and more pressure on social services, which, as I already said, are struggling with limited financial resources, as well as recruitment. And then another thing is retention of the workforce. On the Commission initiatives, let me closely come to the end, and I would just like to mention a few very important that I believe you need to be aware of. We say and we see that not investing in social services has higher cost than anything else. Therefore, the investment in social services should be seen as investments, not as a spending. We have put forward a number of initiatives to support the social service sector. Already a long time ago, and some of you might remember, in 2010, we have put forward the voluntary European quality framework for social services. 14 years in the implementation of this quality framework, we see all the challenges that this framework has faced. We also see what did not work the best. And we are now at the point in time that we are looking how to revamp, how to redesign, and how to make this quality framework, voluntary quality framework, work. In 2022, we have adopted the European Care Strategy. I also truly believe that all of you are familiar with the Care Strategy, which has two key elements. One element is support reflected on a childcare, early childhood education and care, and the other element is long-term care, where we ask for really boosting the access to quality, affordable, and accessible care services. Together with the European Care Strategy, we have put two recommendations. One, which is linked to the childcare aspect, is the revision of the Barcelona targets. But just to set the figure without supporting mechanisms is not really the best way forward. That's why in this recommendation there is an aspect of the quality of childcare services, and also an aspect of addressing the children in need when assessing the services. And children in need, when I say it's children at risk of poverty and social exclusion, and or also facing some additional challenges. The other recommendation is a Council recommendation on access to high-quality, affordable long-term care, where for the first time, with one recommendation, we have put the whole set of quality indicators and principles that need to be respected when reflecting on the long-term care. This year we will be presenting another very important initiative that comes from the Strategy for the Rights of the Persons with Disabilities, and it is the Social Services of Excellence for Persons with Disabilities to improve the social delivery, to enhance the attractiveness of the jobs in this area, and to help persons with disabilities also utilize all of their potential. There are two other initiatives, and then I'm almost there. The recommendation of adequate minimum income, which besides the benefits and the activation element, has the third element, which is access to services and essential services. All of three elements need to work together in order to lift people out of the poverty. And then one very important step in time was the establishment of the Sectoral Social Dialogue Committee on the Social Services. It's at the start, it's at the beginning, it's a fresh, it's a brand new, but it's good to see that the social partners are eager to support this topic and are eager to engage on this topic. And I believe many of you have contact with a number of social partners. Existing financial resources within the present MFF, especially European Social Fund Plus and the Next Generation EU, are the good base to implement various social services and related activities. But still, it is not sufficient, and the member states have to come in and have to chip in as well. The Commission is also offering a practical support. So I believe some of you have heard about Social Services Help Desk that was launched already a year and a half or 2 years ago, that supports the sector in better accessing and using the EU funds. In the end, I would really like to wish us all very fruitful and fruitful conference, good exchanges, and I believe that also what will be said will be used by myself and my colleague in future design of the social policies and future design of the policies relevant to the social services and social workers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. A lot of food for thought, I think. In a moment, I will welcome the keynote speaker of this opening show, who's going to give us even more food for thought. But first, it's time for an artistic interlude. We'll listen to a poem by Palestinian poet Mohamed Al-Najjar. The writer has lived in Bruges since 2018, and I also live in Bruges, and I can tell you he's pretty famous here. And his poem, titled Homeland, is about longing for his homeland, for a time when there was no war and violence and everything was peaceful. The poem will be recited by Haura, who's here from Refu Interim. Refu Interim is an organization that seeks volunteer work for people new to Belgium. Haura is volunteering at this conference. She will recite the poem in Arabic, and on the screen you will see the English translation. Please join me in welcoming and applauding Haura.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is very pleasure and happy for me to read for you the poem for the writer Mohamed Al-Najjar in Arabic. It's about his homeland. الوطن حيث ينام الحمام بسلام فوق أعناق الشجر وتعانق الأشجار واقفة حبيبات المطر عندما تنفض العصافير عن ريشها قطرات الندى بعد الفجر وتغرد راقصة في بهجة وسكر حيث تقبل الورد شفاه الفراشات في الحدائق والطرقات وتنام دون خوف على عتبات السحر عندما تتمشى النجوم فرحة على شواطئ القمر والسحابات تتخفى تحت السماء بين قطرات المطر عندما ينام الناس بكرامة دون جوع ولا بطش ولا خوف ولا اضطرار إلى سفر تعود للبيت فتسقيك الجميلة من شفتيها كأس نبيذ ويرتاح على صدرها رأسك ولا تخشى الضجر عندما لا تكون بحاجة لجنسية أو ديانة أو جواز سفر. Thank you.
Thank you, Haura. That was beautifully recited, and it's a very touching and beautiful poem. Okay, we move on to the keynote speaker of this session. He is one of the leading voices on social work in Europe. His experience with social work practices, as well as his clear understanding of social work traditions across Europe, offer an enriching and scientifically underpinned framework frame of reference for the profession at a European level. The theme of his keynote is Social Work's Potential in Facing Current European Challenges, Lessons from the Profession's History. Please give a big hand and a big applause to Professor of Social Work at the Charles University in Prague, Walter Lorenz.
Thank you very much for that elegant presentation and introduction, and thank you very much to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts with you on such an important occasion, because I really think this is a day when we can take stock not just of what social work has achieved so far, but what are the challenges that social work is facing. And I think particularly the motto that you have chosen, Social Work Matters, I want to introduce that in a variety of contexts where I think social work cannot be narrowed down to the usual tasks in the services, but social work has a much more comprehensive mandate. And this is an opportunity when we look at the challenges that are part of the program today, that we can engage in so many ways beyond the actual services that we are providing. So my intention is that I can first of all look briefly at the history of social work, and I do that not just from a historical point of view, but in a way of making us realize where social work has engaged with politics more explicitly, and where social work has withdrawn or has been restricted to a less political role. And my hypothesis is that unless we face up to our social and political mandate, social work cannot be effective and cannot do its job properly. I want to also see then how the failures and the necessity of engaging with this political dimension has had various brushes with European social policy history. And indeed, that brings me then to the actual situation where we can currently identify in the European and indeed in the global context where social work has a responsibility for maintaining an understanding of what is social that is, if you like, our property, our speciality, rather than conforming to an understanding of what is social that is currently being used in politics, in economics, and so on. So my overall message is that all the challenges that we are dealing with in this conference, the migration, the digital, and the climate challenges, can only be addressed if we identify the social element and the social challenges that contained in them. They are not just technical issues, they are not just administrative issues, they're not even just political issues, but they're ultimately social issues, and social work has essential messages to contribute to that. So let's look briefly back at how social work has engaged or failed to engage with the unification processes. And I would like to emphasize that both the European project at the broad political scale and social work in its daily work all serves the integration of a society that would otherwise be characterized by divisions, by conflict, by disintegration. So how did the post-war welfare states in the Western European countries, what kind of principles do they enshrine? Well, there's first of all the realization of social citizenship. I think T.H. Marshall's diagnosis that civil citizenship, political citizenship, needs to come to fruition when people experience their citizenship in their daily lives and not just every 4 years or 5 years when you go to elections. Therefore, moving from charity to a public and indeed a rights-based approach to welfare has been one of the guiding principles of the welfare state motions. Introducing some measure of redistribution was an important aspect of that, demonstrating then also through that how welfare is directly connected to a democratic process, how people who can enjoy their freedom only in a situation where they are socially and financially secure in life's crisis. And that, of course, has been a very strong pillar of the welfare state project in the Western Hemisphere altogether. And through that also then presenting the social face of capitalism. The welfare project was obviously developed in close competition with what then divided Europe and what divided the world with the Cold War. And we mustn't forget that the welfare agenda has something to do with that competition. But when I list those kind of priorities that have developed at the national level, we also have a picture that makes us ask, where are we at the moment with those kind of principles? Are they still driving our understanding of welfare, or have fundamental reforms and transformations taken place that move us away from those principles? If you move at the European unification level, what has driven that project? Well, I grew up with the whole development of Europe. I was 10 years old when the Treaty of Rome was concluded in 1957, and I certainly think I owe my identity to the fact that I could distance myself from the then very precarious German identity. I grew up in West Germany, and I certainly felt that Europe was offering me a different context and a different opportunity of shaping my identity rather than falling into this unresolved Nazi, still dominated identity of West Germany at the time. Of course, it also had the economic agenda. The rivalry that had also led to the 2 world wars in the last century was meant to be overcome by looking at economic collaboration and moving beyond competition there, opening markets across borders. And there was also the social policy agenda, particularly in the form of ensuring workers' rights, reducing also the inequalities between the center and the periphery, and therefore intervening in the way that has also been mentioned by the representative of the Commission today in inequalities out of geographical and other factors. The principle that underlies the European social policy is that of subsidiarity. And I think that's one of the crucial ambivalent points built into the European project, that because welfare is such a culturally determined matter and has such a function for legitimating the nation state and the integration at the national level, the European Union had always to be very careful not to, as it were, take that responsibility away from the nation state. And that's both its strength and its weakness. And historically, you can look back at the strategy that Bismarck, as the German Chancellor in 1870s, applied to bringing the different independent German states together under the German Reich. Social policy and social legislation was one of the big achievements that made that a successful project. The other one was to create an external enemy and start a war against France. And I think that's the warning example. And I think it's a warning example in today's context as well, that Europe should not be united by a common enemy, but by core principles that bring us together. How did social work accommodate itself in that period of welfare developments? Again, just a few points. Social work was able to build on the internationalism that was built into the history of social work. If you look at the leading figures, particularly women, that promoted professional social work internationally for the previous 100 years, you could see that internationalism was always one of their strengths. In order to distance themselves from becoming bureaucrats and becoming just executors of the social welfare system of a particular nation. That developed the standard model of social work in terms of casework, group work, community work. And the basic stance that came out in that was that social work should be scientifically neutral, that it should apply to all people of all ethnicity, of all cultures in the same way. And we had that slogan of people are people, certainly a motto that my social work training still incorporated. The principle of self-determination was very strong at the time. People should be enabled to help themselves. And that, of course, also links directly with the democracy agenda that was driving the welfare state developments. And with that, however, we can see that there was a fundamental ambiguity built into the social work identity at the time. That on the one hand, it distanced itself from politics in being neutral and not taking a particular political stance. But of course, de facto, it served that kind of an agenda and served also the moderating function of not having the worst effects of capitalism become a threat to the stability of a society. What happened to the welfare project in the 1970s, and again, the historical comparisons should give us a warning today. It was wars in the Middle East that created enormous economic difficulties. The oil crisis, but whether it really was just an oil crisis is another matter. But suddenly the welfare state was not affordable anymore. There were necessity for governments to borrow heavily. Unemployment came into the, sorry, I went too far with the, yeah. Sorry. Okay, there's a slide missing, but we come on then that this crisis of the welfare state has indeed had an enormous impact on the affordability of welfare, and has then joined with the European integration project of bringing Europe closer together, but at the same time the financial facilities were extremely limited. Out of that then, we had the, we had the new social movements in the 1960s, particularly 68 was a decisive step, which challenged the neutrality of social work, which made it more important to realize that social work was always done from a particular perspective, that identities mattered. And in that context, we had developments that, for instance, black social work was being promoted as a distinct form of social work, feminist social work. We had the relevance of differences as constructed differences, that people were not, if you like, culturally separate from their needs, but their needs and the culture went together. Social workers in that period also became interested in exchanging more across different European welfare systems, recognizing the differences, valuing those kind of differences. And it was also a time of the rediscovery of poverty, when statistics were able to demonstrate that the welfare state had certainly not eliminated poverty. So all of that, as I said, has led to the crisis of the welfare state, sorry about the mix-up with the slides, the realization that the welfare state was not affordable anymore, and that social work had to have an active engagement with European transnational contacts and with joint projects there. The European project developed its ambivalence very clearly, that on the one hand it was moving towards this ever closer union, but whether that was just a matter of economic advantages or whether it actually developed a social vision of Europe, as particularly Jacques Delors had intended, that remained very much a challenge, and particularly a challenge from the then member of the European Union, the United Kingdom, when Margaret Thatcher famously opted out of the social implications, the social charter. And therefore, it became very difficult for social work to see in what way to engage with those kind of developments. What became then very decisive, I think, in the history of Europe and I think in global history, were the events of 1989, which was either celebrated as the victory of civil society activism or a victory of capitalism over communism. And the reconstruction of the democratic welfare measures in Central and Eastern Europe came very much then already under the dictate of politics that had grown in the West, with the governments moving towards neoliberalism very decisively. And therefore, into the developments in Central and Eastern Europe, and particularly the development of social work, we see again a fundamental ambivalence between, on the one hand, having a very strong emphasis on civil society engagements, on non-governmental organizations playing a big role, but at the same time, even them being very often instrumentalized for the purposes of privatizing what should be public services. And I think that is a paradigm that not just in Central and Eastern Europe has significance, but for us in all of Europe, that kind of an ambivalence as we look at more voluntary and more civil society engagement in the delivery of social services. The European Union had a very strong role in demanding a social rights orientation in preparation of membership. And I think that was a very strong influence that is to be felt today. And the restart of social work education in those countries, anybody who was engaged there, like myself, I found that very exciting, that people discovered their own traditions that were not just imports from the West, but the approaches to social work and to social welfare had their very distinct character there as well. However, what I said was that all that was already under the impact of the spread of neoliberalism. And if we look at how neoliberalism has impacted on social work, I think you're all familiar with those consequences. I just want to summarize them under the following headings. We have experienced the impact of managerialism, the introduction of new public management regimes into social services, and with that achievement targets, and the whole thing obviously connected also to budgeting and to making efficiency count also in monetary terms. Social work performance is increasingly, I think, governed by regulations. Part of that stems from various scandals of social workers having made the wrong decisions, particularly in the areas of child protection. But the spiraling of the risk reduction and risk elimination policies in terms of increasing regulations constitutes a very serious threat, I think, to social work's professional autonomy. There's an emphasis on activation, that social workers are becoming part of regimes that have to activate unemployed people, people with disabilities, to seek work as quickly as possible. And again, I think that is having an impact on the discretion in a professional sense that social work is called upon. Social work methodology is flirting with evidence-based practice that is so popular and so successful, apparently, in the medical field. But whether evidence-based practice can mean the same in social work is very much the question that has to be answered. And I think the overall effect of these kind of tendencies has been to force social work again into a depoliticized role. And that has given us a lot to think. Where Europe has reacted, I think, in the most negative way was then in the banking crisis of 2008, where really the orientation towards monetarism has had disastrous effects on countries particularly affected by that crisis. If you look at Greece, if you look at Ireland at the time, if you speak to social workers who lived through that period in Greece, it was a fallback to the 19th century, that people were thrown out into the streets, were dependent on food aid, were just in abject poverty as a direct result of the frantic saving of banks policy that dominated this period. It also had this kind of internalization of welfare mentalities, that people just had to look after themselves. This kind of a basic attitude, which, according to some studies that I was horrified to read, had even reached social work students, that in that period, students of social work increasingly felt that poverty was a matter of personal failings rather than of structural issues. A drastic rise in youth unemployment. If I look at the country where I live, in Italy, we had almost 50% youth unemployment in that period. And it creates an anti-European Union resentment that the bureaucrats in Brussels, the tendency, of course, that manifested itself in Brexit, became disastrously widespread. But I think at the same time, we are experiencing now a reawakening of the political role of social work. I find evidence of that, particularly in the global definition of social work that was concluded in 2014 between the global organizations of social work, which affirms very strongly social rights and a justice orientation. We find much more emphasis on user participation, both in practice and in research in social work. And I think all the challenges that brings is a clear indication of social and political issues going together in social work. We have a greater attention in many countries, and it's not just in Hungary, where it's particularly acute, of the manipulation that governments try to impose on social work. I was even made aware in Sweden, government legislation is forcing social workers to operate really as spies on illegal immigrants. And the social work profession is reacting very strongly to that. And I think that's a challenge that we have to discuss in these 2 days as well. We have a return to radical and critical social work. Numerous publications again reaffirm a role of social work with an explicit political orientation. And I think we have, in the aftermath of the corona crisis, a new understanding of what social means. Social is not just an abstract concept, but social means hugging people, for instance, being close to each other, and not just following regulations as it had to be implemented in many residential homes, where people were deprived of all these immediate expressions of what means to be social. So, is social work equipped to really deal with the most pressing challenges in Europe today? Post-COVID has obviously caused a complete rethink or a fundamental rethink in terms of the European role in welfare matters. And again, we had references to the European Pillar of Social Rights. That goes into different rounds now. However, despite of that, child poverty, for instance, in 2022 remains at an incredibly high level. A quarter of children in Europe are at risk of poverty, and in some countries, like even Spain, but then particularly in Romania and Bulgaria, it is higher than that, and I think that is an absolute scandal that shows a failing in providing a social security for the most vulnerable people in our society. And I ask myself, where is there an equivalent lobby to the protests that the farmers have, for instance, managed to raise in recent months about changes in the agricultural policy? That is something that gives me to think. I think we also then have to confront the issues of borders, not just in terms of the immigration issue, but we see increasing borders being introduced internally, and the old distinction that social work tried to get away from in the 19th century of being in the role of distinguishing between deserving and undeserving clients, that is catching up with us again. We have the phenomenon of charity economy, even in countries that are famous for their progressive social democratic welfare regimes. In Finland and Sweden, these tables, food distribution, clothing distribution to poor people is making the rounds and is involving social work in decision-making about welfare approaches as a matter of rights or as a matter of charity once again. And finally, the economic crisis is more a social issue than the environmental crisis is also much more a social issue than just an economic or a technical issue, and I think that's something that we will be debating here. So to conclude, turning social work practice lessons into political lessons, what does that mean for me and the strategies that we can derive from that? I think one of the fundamental insights of social work practice is that when you externalize problems and try to pass them on to another agency or to another level, they will always return. Racism, colonialism, nationalism is now a massive issue that Europe has and the nation states have ignored for far too long. And I think, again, the intercultural and anti-racist competences of social work are absolutely crucial, not just in their daily practice, but as models that social work has to engage with in structural issues as well. And I think only through an engagement with structural causes of poverty and unemployment can the whole notion of activation be again turned into something that is a comprehensive help to self-realization rather than as a means of punishment that poor people are now also having to look after themselves and get themselves out of the difficulties as is meant by those kind of policies. And finally, widening the understanding of context as it's being done now in terms of eco-social work, and something that we are engaged in the discussions here, is a very central task for social work, but not just in terms of joining environmental groups, but making the eco-social orientation matter in the ordinary daily engagement in the kind of situations that social work are facing. For me, the central issue is that we in social work have the responsibility of turning border issues, wherever we encounter them, into a search for identities. The social is not just a quality of certain people or certain institutions. The social consists in making connections between things that aren't necessarily social themselves. So crossing borders, negotiating differences between borders. That means at the personal level, assisting people to integrate. Invariably, their identities are multiple identities, are results of intersectionality, and coming to terms with that and making something positive out of that multiplicity is confusing many, particularly young people, but not only young people. And social work has a prime responsibility of making its competences count in that context. But I think that has a direct parallel at the European level. European citizenship, European social citizenship, must become again a lived experience for people and not just something in extreme situations, not just something for marginal groups, but for all the citizens of Europe need to have an awareness of the social dimension of their European citizenship and European existence. And so finally, I want to state that Europe has a fundamental ambivalence built into it, and we have to face up to that. Europe is always in danger of splitting up into these little fiefdoms, become defensive against each other, falling back to boundaries, not just national boundaries, but regional boundaries. And that has had disastrous consequences, particularly in the world wars. But it also is a project of a unity of high values. Europe has a heritage of ambitions, the Enlightenment with all the negative sides of that. Liberty and peace are ideals around which Europe can unite. And I think these kind of polarizations that we are experiencing at the moment are unhelpful. We have to look at our dark side and we have to look at our hopeful side. And social workers are particularly well equipped to deal with those kind of polarizations in their daily work and have the skills to overcome that. And I look forward to sharing that with you in these days. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Lorenz. I told you he was going to give us some food for thought, and I thought that was a big, tasty meal. Anyways, what do social workers from different European regions think about the importance of social work, and why did they choose this work? Let's find out in a video.
Goedemorgen allemaal.
Здравейте.
Hallo. Zua.
De keuze voor sociaal werk was voor mij eigenlijk een evidentie. Ik ben altijd gefascineerd geweest door de zoektocht van mensen naar een beter leven. Ik zie een sociaal werker dan eigenlijk ook een beetje als een soort wandelmaatje die eigenlijk meestapt, een stukje meestapt op de weg van de cliënt.
El trabajo social es importante porque el estado de bienestar de la ciudadanía parte de este trabajo que hacemos.
Ik vind dat iedereen, ook mensen in kwetsbare situaties of mensen met beperkingen, volwaardig kunnen deelnemen aan de samenleving en volwaardig hun rechten kunnen uitputten.
Spodbujati mlade, jih opolnomočiti, jim stati ob strani, ko potrebujejo pomoč, biti zanesljiva, odgovorna odrasla oseba v njihovem življenju.
Als men mij vraagt naar de reden waarom ik dat studeerde, denk ik dat het me gewoon in de genen is meegegeven om een groot verschil te kunnen bieden in de maatschappij.
Elegí ser trabajadora social porque quería ser un agente de cambio en mi comunidad, intervenir con los colectivos en situación de exclusión social y promover transformaciones que favorecieran el bienestar social de las personas y de la comunidad en su conjunto.
My job is an opportunity to make young people believe in themselves and also to be brave and to follow their dreams.
It says here on my card that I should give a spontaneous reaction to the video, so I'll do it. No, there's few things that I love more than seeing people who are passionate about making the world and the lives of others better. So it's very inspirational. Anywho, enough of my spontaneous thoughts. Let's go. Let's listen to some interesting people who will be joining me here in my little living room. First up is the Secretary General of the Flemish Department of Care, Karine Moykens. The second person joining me will be the chairman of the Flemish platform Strong Social Work, Koen Hermans. Welcome, Karine, and welcome, Koen. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for taking the time. Koen, you are the chairman of the Flemish platform Strong Social Work, the ideal person to explain what strong social work is.
Strong social work is our identity, is our slogan, and behind the slogan is a strong network organization in which different social workers, experts by experience, social work educators, social work academics are working together to strengthen the social work identity on the one hand, but also to contribute to the public debate on, and Walter has really shown us what the social can mean in our society. It all started with our first social work conference in 2018. It was really a big success. We didn't expect that, and we thought it was the end of a whole process of engaging and talking with social workers on what unites them. But in the end, it was the start of a really impressive process in which we try to bring social workers together. We want to exchange knowledge, and we especially also want to highlight how social workers contribute to major societal challenges.
Cool. The aim of this conference is simple: bring together social professionals, academics, civil society organizations, and policymakers from across the European Union. And the themes and the issues that we are highlighting have been named a few times, but can you elaborate a little bit more on why those issues were chosen?
Like for the conference in 2018 and also in the conference we did in Belgium in 2022, we always chose for a more participatory approach. And this means that we try to engage as much as possible a lot of stakeholders. We want to learn from them. We want to learn from what is happening on the grounds. And this is why we have chosen these three major societal challenges. By bringing together a lot of these actors, not only on the Belgian level, but also on the European level, the idea was to think about and to reflect upon what unites us, what brings us together, instead of what are the differences in social work. And by doing all these conversations on these different levels, these three challenges were chosen. Also, and I think Katarina already referred to that, because on the European level, these three major challenges are also confronted with a lot of new policy measures. So the idea was what's going on the ground in different European countries on the one hand, but also what can social work contribute to the European agenda and the European project, as Walter already has explained to us.
All right. Karine, you are the Secretary General of the Flemish Department of Care. So, why does the Flemish government support this, all of this?
Okay, when you talk about social work and the goal, the aim of social work, you talk about human rights and fundamental social rights. And I think everybody wants to realize, to guarantee those rights for everybody. We too. And you have to know that in Flanders, in the Flemish administration, every agency, every department has a slogan, a device. Flanders is And for my department of care, it is Flanders is caring and healthy living together. So if you know that automatically the Department of Care is wanting to take care also of all those persons who want to have a better life, as we have also seen in the video. So we are trying to help everybody, and especially the social workers, when they want to guarantee and to work for those human and fundamental social rights. And I think it's not only the need of a strong social policy. Of course, you need that. You've heard our minister. But it's also the fact that you need strong social workers. Because even if you have a strong social policy, but you don't have strong social workers, you won't realize anything at all. So it's very important that we can inspire and stimulate the social workers to help all those people who have questions, who have needs in their lives, to realize those rights and to realize that better life.
Beautiful. This isn't the only conference or symposium that that the department helps organize. So can you elaborate a little bit more on the other symposia you've been organizing?
At this very moment, it's rather busy. In the beginning of the week, on Monday, we had the final conference of Caring Neighborhoods. Also related with social work, because what we did was simulating 132 projects in Flanders, where first of all local authorities made an analysis of the needs of a certain neighborhood to see, okay, what do the people need in that neighborhood, and bringing together afterwards formal and informal caregivers to see how we can help those persons. And we call it the little helping, because it's not only the doctors and the pharmacists, etc. It's also taking care of your neighbor by going to the pharmacy to get some medication for the neighbor who is ill, for example. So it's the warm, caring neighborhood. And it was the conference where we brought together all those people, also with their coaches, to see, okay, what do we have to do to be able to continue all this? As well on the regional level with my department, but also in the local authorities. We have the elections, never forget.
They wouldn't let us.
And on the other hand, so today and tomorrow we are here, of course. And on the other hand, we have next week, we have also a conference of 2 days talking about the data connection with the purpose of integrated care. I'm convinced that for the future, we will have personalized care and integrated care. Otherwise, we won't be able to continue to pay for care and cure. So we need to work together. And when you talk about integrated care, you talk about connecting the data locally, regionally, federal, international level too. So that's what we ought to be talking about next week, also with some digital tools. I'm very proud because with my department we just launched Alivia. Alivia is a digital tool just to support all the caregivers surrounding a person with the needs who lives at home and to take care of him one way or another.
Wow, yeah, that does sound a little busy. Karine, another question for you. The social issues at the heart of this conference, climate change, migration, and digitalization, that's a difficult word to pronounce, digitalization. They create a lot of extra work for social workers, and you said it yourself, like we need strong social workers to have a good policy. And there's already a shortage of social workers.
Right.
Do you have any ideas on how that can be solved?
It's a problem that you can say it's a problem today, you cannot have a solution tomorrow. It's impossible. First of all, I think that it's important when we talk about a shortage and a lack of personnel, that when you say that in our country, but I think internationally, people easily think about the healthcare sector. Oh yeah, there is a lack of doctors, there is a lack of nurses, etc., and they forget the importance of social work, of welfare. And I think, first of all, we need to highlight that also in welfare, in social work, there is a lack of personnel, a shortage. And so we recently started, but really very recently, so we don't have results yet, but we started a project with, where we first of all want to do an in-depth analysis of what is the problem, because saying there is a shortage, that's one thing, but what are the reasons? And how can we try solutions, to find solutions, short-term, long-term, and that is what we are trying to do right now, but as we recently started, we don't have results yet, of course, but I believe in it, and I think it's very important to continue and to go on, and not to stop here after this conference to say, okay, we had 2-3 years that we worked together for a strong social work, but now to continue and to see how can we manage the future.
Yeah. Would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, a really interesting point is also that the issue of the shortages of social workers was already taken on board by our local and regional chairs. In our platform of strong social work, we not only work on the Flemish level, bring all these persons together, but we also really want to work on the local and the regional level. So it means that in every part of Flanders we have a regional chair who really tries to bring social workers on the ground together, discussing what their challenges are. And for instance, the issue of shortages was already mentioned by them during the COVID crisis. They were saying there's happening something on the ground. We're losing people. People are leaving the job. They're choosing another sector. And on the other hand, we also noticed very quickly that it's not only about a lack of new social work, it's really about the working conditions. So how we work together in strong social work is really bringing people together on the local and the regional level and learning from them. We all know that, and it has already been mentioned, you can have very strong social policies, but if you don't have workers that are fulfilling their task on a daily basis, working together with people, working in neighborhoods, working with communities, then these social policies don't become active. They don't get any results. So this is why we bring these social workers together to learn from them, but also to be sometimes a little bit critical to them. So we try to act as a critical friend, discussing with them, highlighting what their strengths are, but also challenging them on these broader societal challenges.
All right. In a moment, a new panelist will join us, but first, we will watch a video where young social workers from different European regions talk about the themes of the conference: climate, digitalization, and migration. So let's see what they have to say.
I think that climate change is a challenge of our century, because we will be the first generation that will feel the impact of climate change and the last one to actually do something about it.
Wobei die Klienten vermehrt von unsicheren Lebensbedingungen berichten. Diese Unsicherheiten tragen sie zusätzlich zu ihren persönlichen Problemen und Krisen bei. Außerdem kommt es aufgrund der Benachteiligung zu Schwierigkeiten mit der Digitalisierung mitzuhalten.
Het zijn zaken die in de leefwereld van jongeren echt een dagelijkse kost zijn, een gigantische rol spelen, die kinderen en jongeren echt wakker houden. Het is niet toevallig dat klimaat een van de prioriteiten was van de Vlaamse Jeugdraad.
podnebne spremembe, migracije in tudi digitalizacija vsekakor vpliva tudi na mlade, s katerimi mi delamo. Naprimer, kar se tiče podnebnih sprememb, je dober primer, kako zelo taki dogodki vplivajo na celotno skupnost. So lanskoletne avgustovske poplave, ki so močno prizadele našo skupnost. Naši mladi so se takoj odzvali, pripravili smo skupne akcije in šli na teren, kjer smo pomagali našim someščanom pri odpravljanju posledic poplav.
Son yıllardaki göçün artmasıyla birlikte de tabii ki bizler burada insanlara daha çok psikolojik ve sosyolojik anlamda destek olmanın da aslında ne kadar önemli olduğunu görüyoruz. Bunların yanında tabii ki elimizden geleni yapmaya özen gösteriyoruz.
Alles gebeurt online. Mijn cliënten moeten formulieren invullen, afspraken moeten ze maken online. En dat kan wel een keer een groot probleem zijn voor mensen die niet zo goed met de computer kunnen werken.
Digitalisierung bedeutet für mich Niedrigschwelligkeit. Es bedeutet für mich die Brücke zu den Menschen, mit und für die ich mich einsetzen möchte, zu arbeiten und ihnen bestmöglich helfen zu können.
Mladí lidé taky, se kterými pracujeme, často se potýkají s tím, že nemají dostatečnou digitální gramotnost, někdy podléhají fake news a s tím třeba zůstá strach z některých věcí, často neopodstatněných.
Per quanto riguarda il positivo, il digitale credo che sia un ottimo supporto al nostro lavoro, sia per parlare lo stesso linguaggio dei ragazzi e sia per portarli verso quei percorsi che noi riteniamo giusti per loro. Il digitale poi tra l'altro è anche molto meritocratico, quindi permette a tutti di poter partecipare nei percorsi formativi.
Therefore, I think that we should work together strong on solutions, because history won't judge us on the goals we set, but on the action that we take together.
Bye.
Cheers.
Ahoy.
Addio.
Well, we are joined by another panelist here, Jente Fernande. Am I saying that right?
Yeah,
okay. He's a youth worker at Arctos. In this panel discussion, we will speak Dutch. But thanks to the simultaneous translation, everything will be translated into English. So this is the time to put on your headsets. Okay, I'll give you a few seconds to do that. Maybe in the meantime, we can explain the fact that there's an empty chair, because we were supposed to have 2 more panelists. Koen, I think you can explain.
Ja, dat klopt. Can you already go for?
Yes,
Ja,
ik denk het wel.
okay,
Ik denk dat we kunnen om...
Okay. There's indeed, normally we also invited Cindy from the Network Against Poverty, and we invited her here on stage because when we talk about social work, we do not only want to listen to policymakers and researchers and academics and people like Jente, youth workers. We also want to actually have people here on stage who are expert by experience because it's important as social workers to not just talk for people or about people, but also to give people who are in a vulnerable situation to actually get their voices heard. And Cindy is an expert by experience for the Network Against Poverty. And this is actually a framework organisation of different organisations where poor people take the floor. And these local organisations, that is really something specific for Flanders, because on the one hand, people in poverty are being set around a table in order to take away that stigma of poverty. But these organizations also have the task to listen to the voice of people in poverty and to represent this at the policy table. So it's really a shame that she cannot attend today and that we cannot listen to the expert by experience, Cindy. Well, but she's here in our minds, in our thoughts, right? But Jente, all pressure on your shoulders, right? Now, we just saw the video with all the young social workers, and they mentioned the different topics, digitalization, climate change, migration, and which topic is especially important, a priority for you? Well, if you look at the 3 topics, well, those topics need to be dealt with, all of them. And if you start with climate change, for example, I'm young, right? Reasonably young. And this is something that I will experience, right? So someone said, okay, right now, we will be the generation that will be impacted by climate change, but we're also the generation that can still fight it. And I think that it's really one of the truths, and we really need to do something about it. At the same time, I'm also a youth worker, so I work with youngsters. I also work with a lot of migration youngsters, and these can be second or third generation migrants. But it's so powerful to see, because I focus on the power of those youngsters and on reinforcing their voices. And if I see what it can mean for them and how it can inspire other youngsters who might not have the tools or are a bit more unsure about their situation, I do see that it's really necessary. Indeed. Now, when I look around, I see that social workers, they are really passionate, right? You can't do the job of a social worker if you're not passionate. And can you explain what inspires you and what makes you do it over and over again, each and every day? Well, on the one hand, it's really cool to be a social worker as well, because we need to be the ones that need to be critical, and you are the person to question things, and you need to work with those different elements. And on the other hand, Actos, that's my organization. I find it's a super duper cool organization, right? And we really take our time to get to know the youngsters, and then we actually go and look what their forces, what their powers are, what they can do. And I actually work especially on how spending your spare time, and this is one of our methods that we use. And we had to set up an entire trajectory while working with leisure activities, and it's a wonderful job to combine these elements. Okay, and then normally I had a number of questions for Cindy, which is unfortunately not possible, but I have a final question for all three of you, and you can have a brief reaction or you can have a long reaction, doesn't matter, right? But what do you expect from this conference, or do you have a specific message for this conference? Koen? Well, as an academic, of course, I'm privileged, and I have the opportunity to attend different scientific conferences in different countries, and there I already have the experience to exchange with the other European colleagues, and this is really inspiring, because on the one hand I can actually identify my own blind spots, and then I can also see why is that the case. And I just hope that you have those same experiences so that you can identify your own blind spots, and on the other hand also, when exchanging, being proud of what we do. So when I talk about our social work in Flanders and the political role of social work in Flanders, I do see that we have a lot of expertise in Flanders in the way we do it. And a conference is a moment where you can also put the expertise in the spotlights. So these two elements are important. So being critical on the one hand, identifying your own blind spots, but on the other hand as well, at the same time being proud of what you're doing, and really working on those larger social values. Well, great challenge to tackle. Your turn. Well, when I look at how we got started today, and when I look at the rest of the program of the next 2 days, I'm convinced that numerous ideas will be discussed, and that the contents are right. And that's why I would like to address all of you. Please do use this conference to get to know one another, to make a link, a connection, and to share your passion of social work. Try to learn from one another, try to learn from each other's ideas, and just make social work even stronger, so that policymakers can not only say, okay, we'll create a strong social policy, but that you also will work in an even more passionate way on this strong social work. Jente, you've got the floor. Yes, but well, workshops will be very interesting. I'm convinced, right? But as they said, today we're together. And we need to use this opportunity because we're now here for about an hour and a half, and I've got the impression that I really learned things, and I already have the feeling, okay, why didn't I get to know you before today? Okay, thank you. Okay, and don't forget the bingo cards, delicious chocolates to win, so reasons enough to mingle.
Being here in my living room. Thank you so much for this very interesting panel.
Thank you.
We're almost at the end of this opening show, but I would like to welcome one more special guest. Please give a warm welcome and applause to the regional coordinator of Refu Interim, Fie Velge. Is her mic on?
Hello? Okay.
Okay.
I don't hear it.
Well, as long as they hear you. Can you hear her? Okay, that's all that matters. Welcome, Fie. Thank you for joining us. You're the regio coordinator. I think that translates to regional coordinator.
So.
Yes, of Refu Interim.
Yeah.
As I explained when the poem was recited by Haura, Refu Interim is an organization that seeks voluntary work for people new to Belgium. Can you explain that a little bit better?
Yeah, we always say what we do is no rocket science. It's actually really simple. And one of our baselines is we just connect nice people with nice organizations. And that's actually what we do on a day-to-day basis in different cities in Flanders. We're also starting up in Brussels. That's like a premiere.
Oh, wow.
Yes, but so we're also active here in Bruges. We connect people who are new in Belgium with organizations and city services, but we spend a lot of time and effort in preparing both parties to collaborate together. We do that through organizing, to register, through registration days, orientation days, workshops and activities with the people who want to volunteer, but also by running a trajectory with organizations. Because it's not because an organization is really enthusiastic to work together, maybe just because they have a shortage on volunteers, that they're welcoming enough and that they don't have barriers for people to come and do volunteer work there. So spending enough effort on both sides to make them meet in the middle is the work of our colleagues who are working in the different cities. Yeah.
Great. There are some volunteers here.
Yes.
What are they doing?
We were, as a social organization ourselves, we were happy that we could collaborate. So I think most of you were welcomed this morning by hugs and feet bumps and whatever you chose. So these were volunteers. There's also there's around 20 volunteers helping at the conference. Haura is one of them. There are people handing out the headphones. There will be people going around with mics. And at the entrance, volunteers of us were helping as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Another initiative is the Living Library. Yes. What is it?
It's happening today. We actually, besides the volunteer work, we also like to invent new concepts. Because we believe also through volunteering, but through other things as well, that hearts and minds only open when people really meet. And it's not always possible to meet people that differ in some kind of ways from who you are yourself or from your own social circle. So one of the concepts that we've been doing is Living Library. It's not something that we invented, but we adapted it a bit to our own DNA. And it's the idea that instead of going to a real library where you take a book, you actually can talk to a real person and listen to their real stories. I actually brought a book and now I forgot to show it.
No worries.
To bring it. So it's happening today. If you're somebody who doesn't like the break times during conferences and you prefer to sit on the toilet alone instead of having to be social, or you don't know who to talk to, then there are people here today where you can talk to. We have 10 of our volunteers who are a living book. They will be on the 4th floor where all the coffee and food is.
Smart.
During the voilà. I think everyone will go there. So during lunch break and also in the afternoon break, our books will be there, and you're very much welcome to come and have a chat with them. On the book covers, where you can choose, there's a short description of the person, like a biography, also what they like to talk about and what they don't like to talk about, and in which languages you can lend them out. Voilà.
Can you take them home or no?
You cannot take them home. unless, I don't know what can
Let's
happen.
find out what happens. Anything is possible.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. When I introduced myself, I said I'm a writer and a cultural coordinator. So in my day job as a cultural coordinator, I've worked with Refu Interim, so I can really vouch that everything you've just said is true. It's a wonderful organization. So thank you very much for being here. And let's give a big applause to both Fee and all the volunteers.
All the volunteers, yes. Thank you very much.
We're almost at the end of the session. I would like to thank all our guests, our panelists, the keynote speaker, everybody. And I would like to thank all of you, of course, for being so attentive. I really want to wish you 2 inspiring days, a lot of great connections, but I'm sure that all of that will happen. I can feel it in the air. But to conclude the session, I would like to give the last words to someone you've already met here, the chairman of the Flemish Platform for Strong Social Work, Koen Hermans.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm a little bit surprised to end this opening session. It's a surprise to me. Anyway, this is my moment. No, it's not true. I'm going to take this moment. I wish you all a very inspiring conference in which you will have a lot of interesting meetings. Hopefully you also have some moments that you're a little bit doubting about yourself, that you're thinking, oh, what does this mean for me as a practitioner? So it's not only about cheering up and have these wonderful conversations, it's also a moment for reflection, I think. So let's seek those moments of reflections. Let's try to think about what Walter Lorenz has told us about the ambivalent role of social work. It's not only showing how good we are, it's at the same time also reflecting upon what are our weak sides. How can we strengthen the discussion about social? As a social work professor, my first question to my students is always, you're a social worker, what does social mean to you? Let's take this question throughout the whole conference to reflect upon the meaning for you as a social worker about the social. What brings us together? What are these values that are guiding our social workers? It's not only about doing social work, it's also thinking about these bigger values that bring us together, not only in Belgium, but also on the European level. It has been already mentioned a couple of times. What does human rights, social justice, solidarity, democracy, and respect for diversities mean for us as social workers? I wish you a really promising and interesting conference.